The mug slipped from my fingers, smashing into jagged pieces across the tile. My father's voice came at me like a strike. "What have you done?" "Adriana." The words were a demand, not a question. He stood in the doorway, broad shoulders stiff under his pressed shirt, eyes narrowing like he was bracing for the worst. I straightened my back, one hand resting lightly against the curve that barely showed beneath my sweater. "I'm pregnant." My voice didn't shake. Not this time. The silence that followed was heavy enough to pull the air from the room. My mother, Lorraine, froze halfway down the stairs, her lips pressed into a pale line, eyes cool, not concerned. She didn't move closer. She didn't ask anything. Richard's face darkened. "Who is he?" "Some dropout you met in a parking lot. You've destroyed your life." He took a step forward, jaw clenched so tight I thought something might crack. I kept my voice even. "His name doesn't matter. I love my child. And I'm keeping it." His laugh was bitter, sharp. "We gave you everything, a home, a future, a college fund, and you threw it away for this I didn't throw anything away." I said, "You're just angry you can't control me anymore." That was it. His voice rose, filling the kitchen. "Get out. Pack your things. You want to play adult live like one." I glanced at my mother, for half a second. I thought she might say something in my defense. Instead, she shook her head slowly, like she was watching someone make an irredeemable mistake. "They didn't ask if I was safe. They didn't ask if I had a plan. They didn't ask if I was ready." I walked upstairs, each step steady. My room was as I'd left it that morning, posters on the wall, books stacked haphazardly on the desk. I pulled my duffel bag from the closet, stuffing clothes into it without folding them. No one knew I had signed a lease on a small studio apartment across town. No one knew I'd been working part-time for months. And no one knew the truth about the baby's father, something they wouldn't believe even if I told them. When I walked out the front door, the air was cool against my face. I didn't look back. My fingers tightened around the strap of the duffel. The weight of it nothing compared to what I carried inside. I already had somewhere to go. The door to my new apartment shut with a hollow thud, the sound echoing in the empty space. The air inside was colder than outside, seeping through a cracked window that whistled whenever the wind shifted. I dropped my duffel in the corner and sat on the bare floor, my knees drawn up, my breath visible in the dim light from the single bulb overhead. From my bag, I pulled out the can of soup I'd bought earlier and opened it with the small camping opener I kept on my keychain. No stove yet, no microwave, just a spoon and the determination to eat something. The metallic tang of the soup was sharp in my mouth, but I kept going until the can was empty. My phone stayed silent. Not a call, not a text. The last time I'd heard from any of them was in that kitchen. I hadn't expected an apology, but some part of me had thought someone might check to see if I was okay. That part of me was wrong. 2 months earlier, I had signed the lease to this place in the back office of a tired-looking rental agency, the manager barely glancing up as I slid the deposit across the desk. I had smiled then, knowing it was mine. Around the same time, I'd gotten a job at a small medical clinic on the edge of town. The hours were early, the pay modest, but it was steady and mine to keep as long as I showed up. Sitting there now, I pressed my hand to my stomach, feeling nothing yet but knowing everything was different. I wasn't just building a life for me anymore. I was building one for the child who would never, not for a single second, feel like they weren't wanted. The cold bit deeper as the night wore on, but I lay down on the second-hand mattress I'd picked up that afternoon, wrapping my coat tight around me. I stared at the cracked ceiling until my eyes grew heavy, holding on to the one truth that kept me warm tomorrow. I would start. The clinic sat in a converted brick house just off the main road, the kind of place you might miss if you weren't looking for it. On my first morning, I stood behind the reception desk with my hands tucked under the counter, half expecting Dr. Weston Hale to look me over and decide I wasn't worth the trouble. Instead, he handed me a stack of intake forms and said, "You'll figure it out. Coffee's in the break room." He didn't flinch at my age. He didn't comment on the way I sometimes rested my hand on my growing belly. He didn't ask about the father. He treated me like I belonged there. The work was steady scheduling patients, answering calls, managing the waiting room, and I found myself staying a few minutes late each day just to organize the filing cabinet or wipe down the counter. At night, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and combed through free courses in accounting, budgeting, and business law. I didn't know exactly where I was heading, but I knew I wouldn't stay behind a reception desk forever. No one at the clinic knew the truth about Landon's father. He wasn't dangerous, and he wasn't a mistake. He was a first-year med resident I'd met during his short rotation at the clinic. We'd shared a few weeks that felt like something more. But when I told him I was pregnant, his family's response was swift and cold. They had money, reputation, and a future mapped out for him that didn't include me. He offered money. I told him no. I didn't want Landon to grow up thinking he was a transaction. I wanted him to be mine, fully and without condition. Sometimes, when I passed the framed certificates on Dr. Hale's office wall, I'd think about the man I once knew and wonder if our paths would ever cross again. It wasn't a wish or a fear, just a question I couldn't quite silence. For now, my focus stayed here answering phones, learning skills, and building something steady enough to carry both of us forward. By the time winter settled in, my days blurred together. I worked at the clinic from dawn until late afternoon, then took the bus across town to a call center job that stretched deep into the night. The hours paid for rent, groceries, and prenatal vitamins, but they also chipped away at me in ways I didn't want to admit. At 7 months pregnant, I could feel my body straining. My ankles swelled by noon, my back ached constantly, and my stomach felt like it pulled on every muscle I had left. Still, I kept moving. I had to. One night, the cold wind cut sharper than usual as I waited at the bus stop after my shift. My legs trembled beneath me, and my hands shook as I fumbled with my coat buttons. A wave of dizziness hit, and before I could steady myself, the world tilted. I ended up on the icy bench, clutching my stomach and forcing my breathing to slow. A familiar voice broke through the fog. Adriana. I looked up to see Dr. Weston standing a few feet away, his coat half-buttoned, his brow furrowed. Without a word, he helped me to my feet, guided me into his car, and drove back to the clinic. The waiting room was dark, but he unlocked the door, switched on a lamp, and led me to a chair. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "No," I admitted, "but I will be." He didn't press, instead. He walked into his office, returned with a sealed envelope, and placed it in my hands. "Give this to my sister," he said. "Her name's Evelyn Hale. She runs the finance office at Harrington Medical Headquarters." I stared at the envelope, confused. Why his eyes softened? "Because you remind me of someone I lost once, and I don't make that mistake twice." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The paper felt heavier than it should have, the seal unbroken but full of possibility. I slipped the envelope into my bag, my fingers curling around it like it might vanish if I let go. I didn't know yet if it was a lifeline or a test, but I knew I couldn't leave it unopened forever. 2 months after that night at the bus stop, the world narrowed to the sound of my own heartbeat and the sterile hum of the hospital room. Hours blurred into one another, but when they placed him in my arms, everything became sharply, painfully clear. Landon Voss. He was smaller than I'd imagined, with fists curled tight like he was holding on to something invisible, and eyes that opened slowly, searching for a face he didn't yet know but already trusted. I traced a finger over his cheek and felt a rush of something so fierce it almost hurt. I had thought I knew love before, but this was different, an anchor and a fire all at once. In that moment, I made a promise. He would never wonder if he was wanted. He would never doubt his place in my life, no matter how hard it became. I would make sure the world felt safe in his hands. The weeks after his birth were a haze of sleepless nights and quiet determination. Evelyn Hale called me 2 days after we came home from the hospital. Her voice was brisk, but not unkind. "My brother says you're reliable." She said, "I need someone to handle data entry and financial reporting. It's remote, flexible hours. You'll get paid per project." It wasn't glamorous, but it was a door. I said yes before she finished explaining the pay. My days became a rotation feeding Landon, rocking him to sleep, typing reports at the kitchen table, then picking him up again when he stirred. The click of the keyboard mixed with his soft breathing became the soundtrack of my life. I worked with one hand while cradling him with the other, the screen glowing in the dim light of our apartment. There were moments when exhaustion pulled at me like a tide, when I'd stare at the clock at 3 a.m. and wonder how many more hours I could keep going. But then, Landon would make a small sound in his sleep, his tiny hand reaching out as if to make sure I was still there. And I'd remember exactly why I couldn't stop. Each report I sent back to Evelyn was clean, on time, and double-checked. I didn't ask for praise. I asked for more work. Slowly, the projects came more often, and with them, the faintest sense that I was building something beyond survival. Every night ended the same Landon asleep in his crib, my laptop open, and me refusing to shut it until the last report was sent. I didn't have much yet, but I had him and I had movement forward. 2 years later, my days had a rhythm: early mornings with Landon over oatmeal and orange slices, afternoons balancing spreadsheets and expense reports, nights spent on online certification courses while he slept. I was moving forward, step by deliberate step. Then the email came. Harrington Medical, budget review and staffing changes. I read it twice, my stomach tightening. There would be cuts across departments, remote contractors among the first to be reviewed. The timing couldn't have been worse. I'd just enrolled in an advanced accounting course. The tuition paid from my savings. Losing this work would mean starting over again, and I didn't have the luxury of time. The pressure sharpened when I overheard a senior colleague, Marla, on a call. "She's talented." "Sure, but she's a single mom working from home. We need people who can commit fully." Her words burned, but I bit them down. If they thought my life was a limitation, I'd make sure it became proof of the opposite. When an important corporate account began showing inconsistencies, I volunteered to review it even though it wasn't assigned to me. I worked after hours for 3 straight weeks, unpaid, combing through thousands of line items while Landon sat beside me with coloring books. The deeper I went, the more I realized the discrepancies were large enough to jeopardize the entire contract. I organized the findings into a detailed report, complete with solutions, and sent it directly to Evelyn. She called the next morning. "You just saved us a 7-figure account," she said. There was a pause. Then, softer, "Don't worry about your position. Adriana, you've earned your place here." From that day forward, things shifted. Evelyn began copying me on higher-level communications, asking my input on processes beyond my role. The unspoken message was clear: she trusted me. I knew it didn't guarantee safety forever. Jobs could still vanish. Budgets could still change. But for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just clinging to a rung on the ladder, I was climbing it. The townhouse wasn't large, but it was ours. A narrow front yard with a strip of grass for Landon to play on. Clean hardwood floors inside, and a door no one could kick me out of. The first thing I unpacked was a framed photo from his first birthday cake smeared across his cheeks, his smile wide and unguarded. I set it on a small table by the entryway so it would be the first thing we saw when we came home. My wardrobe shifted slowly. I hunted thrift stores for fitted blazers, simple blouses, and low-heeled shoes that made me look like I belonged in the meetings Evelyn sometimes invited me to. Walking into the grocery store or the bank, I noticed the difference in how people addressed me: less like a girl figuring things out, more like a woman with somewhere to be. My parents remained silent. No calls, no letters. But I still heard about them in passing from my aunt's holiday newsletters or mutual acquaintances who didn't realize they were speaking to the daughter they'd erased. Richard had joined the board of a local charity. Lorraine hosted holiday dinners, seating guests at a table decorated with expensive centerpieces. They smiled in photographs, proud of their polished family. One evening, after putting Landon to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with that birthday photo in my hands. For a moment, I considered slipping it into an envelope with no return address, letting them see the face of the boy they'd never met. I imagined their reaction: curiosity, maybe even regret, but the thought soured quickly. They hadn't earned that piece of him. His story, our story, belonged to us until I decided otherwise. I placed the frame back on the table by the door, exactly where it had been, and turned off the light. I was 26 when Evelyn asked me to step into a conference room I'd never been in before: glass walls, leather chairs, and a view of the city that made me stand a little straighter. 2 executives were seated at the far end of the table, folders in front of them. Evelyn slid one toward me. "We're restructuring," she said. "You've been in the shadows long enough. Head of operations. Starting salary, $138,000. Full benefits." For a moment, I could only stare at the offer letter. Years of night shifts, cold apartments, and carefully stretched paychecks pressed in around me, threatening to undo my composure. Evelyn smiled, as if she knew every battle I'd fought to get here. "Don't say no," she added quietly. "You've earned every cent of this." I signed before I could think of reasons not to. By summer, Landon and I had moved into a 3-bedroom home in the historic district, a white-painted brick with tall windows, high ceilings, and a garden tucked behind a wrought iron gate. I paid for it outright. No mortgage, no debt, no one holding a set of keys but me. I didn't post photos. I didn't announce promotions or milestones online. My life wasn't for public validation. It was for the boy who came home from school each day, hung his backpack neatly on its hook, and asked how my meetings went. Landon was 10, now polite, intelligent, and steady in a way that told me the chaos of his first years hadn't touched him. We fell into a new rhythm in that house breakfast in the sunlit kitchen. Evenings in the garden, quiet nights where he read while I reviewed contracts at the dining table. It was the kind of stability I had once imagined in impossible detail. Only now it was real. And still. I told no one who hadn't earned the right to know. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, tucked between a utilities bill and a catalog I hadn't asked for. The envelope was cream-colored, my name written in a hand I recognized instantly. My mother's handwriting slightly slanted, the ink pressing too hard into the paper. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment before opening it. "Adriana, your cousin told us you live nearby. We didn't know how to reach you. We would like to see you and meet your son. Please, if you're willing to talk. No mention of the years in between. No acknowledgement of the day they told me to pack my things and go. Just a request, simple as if the past had been a misunderstanding." I read it 3 more times, trying to guess the reason. Regret, guilt, or just curiosity now that the boy they'd never met was 13 years old. I set the letter down, my hand steady. I could have thrown it away. I could have written back and said nothing had changed. Instead, I decided to invite them no explanations, no hints about where I lived or what I had built, if they wanted to see me. They would walk through the front door of the life they once said I'd never have. I called the number listed at the bottom, my voice polite but distant. "Saturday, 2 o'clock. I said, "I'll send the address." When I hung up, I looked toward the framed photo of Landon on the mantel. He was smiling in it, a boy who had grown up knowing love without condition. They had no idea what they were about to walk into. They arrived 10 minutes early, their car gliding up the drive like they were pulling into a private club. My father stepped out first in a navy blazer, my mother in a tailored dress, both scanning the garden and brick walkway with a mixture of curiosity and calculation. I opened the door before they knocked. For a moment, neither spoke. Their eyes flicked over the high ceilings, the polished wood floors, the framed photographs. I saw the confusion. How had the girl they threw out become the woman standing here? Landon came down the stairs, composed as ever, wearing the navy sweater I'd laid out for him. "Hello," he said, shaking their hands before pulling 2 photos from the sideboard. One was of him beside a tall man in a white coat. That's my dad. He's a cardiovascular surgeon in Boston. The second was me behind a podium with the Harrington Medical logo, and Mom's the head of operations. She runs the place. My father's jaw tightened. "We thought we were protecting you," he said. "You were just a kid." I met his gaze. "You never asked if I was safe." My mother's voice wavered. "I'm sorry. For everything. I forgave you a long time ago." I said evenly, "But that doesn't mean we go back. You can choose to be part of Landon's life, or keep pretending the past didn't happen." They nodded, but I could see they weren't ready for either choice. I walked them to the door and closed it softly behind them.